So what does that do once you've got all that information?
Now you have the map to how to satisfy this client, how to keep them
Yeah,
satisfied. Yeah.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to The Slow Pitch. And if you are new here, my name is Rob, and
I am Lane.
Hey, Lane, how are we doing?
Fantastic, Rob. Yourself?
I'm doing well. I am doing well. It's been crazy busy, but I'm glad to be here with you and talking about this.
Likewise.
For those of you listening, I do want to make sure that I say to everybody, if you haven't listened to the other episodes, first of all, shame on you. But second, it's okay. Not every episode builds on each other. Each one is independent most of the time. So don't worry about that part. What we do try to do is in the website on theslowpitch.com, we try to put links to other episodes that kind of relate. So if you like this one, then you might see that there's a link in the podcast show notes that might show you where you could go find out some more information or something similar. So that may be the case in this one as well. So with that, what are we talking about today, Lane?
Well, Rob, I've got a little bit of a problem. So we've got a client that we started working with them about 5 months ago. It was a 6-month contract. So, we're about a month out. I'm trying to figure out how to kind of re-engage with the client and try to get a renewal going.
I gotcha. So you're saying you've done the work, you're almost done. How do we get some more work out of them?
That's it.
Is there more work to be had?
Oh, there's a lot more work that can be done.
So in this episode, we're going to talk about how to retain a client after you've done the work.
This is the Slow Pitch Podcast.
All right, Lane. So let's get started here with this. Let's figure out, you've done the work. You've worked 5 out of the 6 months.
Yep.
Kind of tell me, how have you done? Like, are you in good shape? Like, are they happy with you? Are they like mad at you? Like, where's the status?
No. No complaints about the work being done. No crazy calls of expressing anger or anything. So as far as I can tell, everything's going great.
No news is good news, is what you're saying, right?
No news is good news.
All right, good. That's probably how most people would run it. And that's probably normal and would feel comfortable with that. And that's good. That's because if they haven't complained, that's a pretty good thing. Do you know if they're looking for somebody to do more work, or do you think maybe, hey, they don't even realize it?
They've not said they're looking for anybody. I've not heard anyone else say anything. So I just assume they maybe don't realize renewals coming up.
Okay. And do you feel like they would be happy to work some more with you, or do you think if they decided they wanted to do some more work, they might look for somebody else?
I have no reason to believe they wouldn't have me keep working on them.
Okay. So no news is good news sometimes, and then sometimes it's not. So I think part of the challenge I run into, and this is a little bit in for those of you listening, if you're new in sales, this is one piece of the puzzle that in this whole sales process. So there's a part of getting a new sale, right? But then there's also how do you maintain or re-engage or get rehired, if you will? And this could be for the business owner. This could be for people working in the business. There's other things with it. This all applies. But this is not a brand new sale. This is somebody you've had a little bit of a relationship with, or enough of a relationship with. And now it's time to figure out, how do we get them engaged to restart up again? Because you're going to finish this project. So that said, something pops into my head, and I can tell you about a little bit of an experience that I had with it one time. But to me, this pops into my head is something that I kind of look at as kind of a customer experience worksheet that I like to work through with clients that have done some work with over the course of some time. If it's a one and done job, it's not as effective. But if you've built a bit of a relationship, 6-month contract is a good time frame. Anything longer than that, really good for this. So this tool that I like to use, or this worksheet, is one of those things that is very simple. It's a little bit counterintuitive, and it's something that not very many people do. So you probably want to hear about this, don't you, Lane? Are you kind of interested or not?
Well, come on, Rob. Tell me more about this.
All right. So the way this works, and I'm assuming you haven't done anything in the beginning of your contract where you would ask them questions about what's really important in doing the work. Like, hey, if we were to rate ourselves now in the very beginning, at the end, what would that look like? You haven't done anything like that, have you?
No, I hadn't even thought of doing that.
Okay. So this worksheet, here's how it works. What I like to do is sit down and say, okay, let's talk about what's important to you before we even get started. Now, that may sound weird, like what's important to you. So let me kind of explain what I mean by that. Okay. Some clients want to have a vendor or a partner in their business as a supporting vendor, let's say, that is more focused on keeping expenses under control and not racking up a bill. Or sometimes they're looking for a vendor that is really looking for them to be able to understand the business really well and use that information to improve whatever work they're doing already. So if you're doing, for example, let's say you're doing websites and you're creating websites, how's the creative process doing and how does it support the whole process that you need behind the scenes for that business? So if a business needs to have leads coming in or needs to have a database that's inputted, does the vendor know or understand how and what they're going to need on behind the scenes so that they can use that information and create what's needed for the client? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
All right. And sometimes they just need, like, I want to have somebody that's going to answer my call when I call. That's it. That's really, really important to me. Because my vendor before didn't call me back right away. They would take 3 days to call me back. So maybe that's something that's really important. So what I did is I created a list of most common things that people say, hey, I need help with from my vendor to do this correctly, or I need them to execute this flawlessly. So sometimes it's the how they work and behave in behind the scenes. Sometimes it's the how productive they are in their work. So, like all these things are really different for each client. So
Right.
I create a list of those. And, maybe there's 10 of them, maybe there's 8 of them that's most common in your business. And then there's some just general business ones that are very, very specific to your business. But generally in any business, there's also some that are out there that are just the same for anybody at business. I like to have them take a look at that list. I create a little description behind it and say, here's what this means, just so we're on the same page. But now let's think about this list. Which of these, this is again in the beginning of our contract, which of these are really, really important to you as we move forward and start working together? And so if they say to me, I need somebody that's really responsive. I need somebody that's going to be able to answer the call when I call them, not make me wait 3 days. I need to have somebody call me back within, let's say, 2 hours. Now, Lane, if you have a client that says, I need somebody to call me back in 2 hours.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, how does that? Yeah.
same day, no problem. 2 hours, sometimes that might be kind of tough.
Okay. So if that comes up, now you have a choice. You just started. You may have
Yeah,
their deposit and signed contract. Is this going to set a precedence? And is this somebody you want to work with? So there's one avenue. The other avenue is, which is more important. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind is, do I want to work with this person? But more important is there negotiation there? So,
right.
and by negotiation, I just mean when you get somebody saying that they want to do this 2-hour response time, your response can just simply be, boy, I can appreciate that. I mean, I'm assuming you've been burned before by that. Tell me about that. And you start to learn more why they're thinking that way. And then you learn
Right.
that somebody took 3 days. And you can say, well, okay, our general practice is, within reason, the same day. So if you call me at the end of the day, it might be first thing the next morning. But if you call me 9, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, I might be back in an hour or two, and it might be at the end of the day. But that's generally what we tend to run, or it's usually within 24 hours, whatever your general is. And then you talk about it. Is this acceptable for you? Because if it's not, we need to talk about it now rather than when your hair's on fire and you want to when you want to talk to me.
So
Go ahead.
this is interesting, Rob. So you're really saying to start having this satisfaction worksheet immediately after you sign the contract, basically.
Yes.
And so we're really going to learn the more of the client's expectations ahead of time before it's too late for us to do anything about it.
Wouldn't you want to know this before you start working with them?
Yeah, absolutely. It totally makes sense.
And sometimes just put it in perspective. Sometimes they're easy and stupid things. Like somebody saying they want to be response in 2 hours. That may sound reasonable in their world because they have a small business, let's say.
Yeah.
But if they're a huge business and they need that and they're paying for it, maybe you can do that. Maybe you can assign somebody to do that.
Yeah.
So, for example, we have a client that we're about ready to take on. They have asked for one particular contact on our end who's going to manage the project, right? Totally acceptable. We want that because we want the same thing on their side. So our conversation was, no problem. We have one person that will be assigned to your project. They're going to do all the stuff's going to go back and forth through them. That's one piece. Conversely, we'd like to have on your side one person. So
Yep.
now we've opened that conversation up, right? And they're like, oh, definitely, that's a good idea. Yeah, we need to do that because otherwise there's too many hands in there. So this is all these. Let's set the expectations because during your sale, what'll happen is during sales you end up. Let's put it this way: how many salespeople out there overpromise.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Most of them.
And that's a mistake, first of all. You should
Yeah.
never overpromise. But if you do or have, this is a good way to kind of correct a little bit as you go. So maybe you didn't say outright, we were so responsive, or we're the most responsive in the world. You didn't say that outright, but they implied or thought you're really responsive. And this is
Yeah.
you're smaller, you can do this. So now you have the chance to say, well, here's our response rate time. And this is usual, this is normal, this is average. And if we're outside of that, that's very unusual. And that means there's something going on and we have to deal with that, but we will get back to you. Now you're having that conversation ahead of time. So when it does happen, now you have at least an expectation set up for them. And more importantly, let's say they wanted a 2-hour window and you said it's going to be the same day best, right? Or the next morning, and you still miss that. In that conversation, now you could even say, now let's pretend we missed it. Let's say you call us at 9:00 in the morning and I don't get back to you until 10:00 the next day. What's going to happen?
Yeah.
That's a valid conversation. Listen, it may not ever happen, but in 6 months, I can't imagine that there's not going to be something going on, that something goes crazy and we just got to deal with it. And, XYZ company, another company has this going on, you have this going on, and this other company has something going on, and we're trying to deal with all three, but we can't answer the phone until we've got something resolved in some areas. So maybe that's the conversation you're having. What all these points do and point to for you is, if you have this understanding of what is important to them before you start working, it's so much easier to re-sign a contract later when
Yeah.
you do the
Yeah.
next step. And it's when you do the next step. So let's say you have your list of things that people might want to talk about and say that this is important to them. So do they get your business really well? Do they get it? That's something that somebody might say. Being responsive is another one that we talked about. So there's a whole bunch of them that could be there. During that conversation in the beginning, ask them, what's your top 3? What's your top 4? What's your top 5? What are the most important ones out of this list? Or if I missed one and you've got something more important than anything on here, what is that? Let's talk about that. Put it down here. And it usually takes them a minute to figure that out. And they'll read through them all. They'll think about it. And it's probably going to be based on something that happened just recently in their lives and their business and their whatever. But once you get through them thinking all of that, they're going to give you 4, 5, 3, whatever it is, really important points that are going to make or break whether or not they're going to work with you again or whether or not they're happy, right?
Yeah.
Then after that, now I want you to weight them. I want you to tell me, how important is this? If number 1 item is quick response within a certain amount of time, and they say this is the number 1 priority, then they should rank that as a score of, let's say 10 out of 10, right? If they have another one that's, I need them to understand that we have to follow specific rules in the industry, and you have to know that information as a vendor, and you need to follow those rules as well. That's going to be one of those things that's going to be a really high priority, but maybe not a 10, maybe it's a 9, because they're really the last step for that, right? Or then 8, whatever that might be. So have them weight it. Like this is the level of importance. You can do a 1 through 5, you can do a 1 through 10, but make them weight that so that you can see which one's the most important. So what does that do once you've got all that information?
Now you have the map to how to satisfy this client.
Yeah.
Keep them satisfied. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're walking out of that meeting going, okay, now I know what we need to do. And so if you have a team working for you, what should you do next?
Oh, share that information. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because that's going to make or break their satisfaction later on, right? As you work together. So to me, that's one step. That's the first step, is the first meeting. Now, if you didn't have that meeting when you started, because you're 5 months into this, I'm assuming you didn't do this, right?
No, I have not.
No, yeah, and that's okay. That's okay. So that's normal, and most people don't. So this is kind of an unusual way of doing things. But what happens is that if you haven't done it and you're at month 5, do it now. What's wrong with doing it right now? Say, you know what? I forgot to do this. I just completely spaced it. I don't know why we didn't. Let's do it.
Yeah, getting the information is better late than never.
Yeah. So now let's say you do that now. Now you've got 30 days to kind of take a look to say, did we do it or did we not? But here's the cool part. You could, at that 5-month spot, you can go to the next section at the same time if you wanted. So they do the information of what's important and the weighting. You could, right after that, just go to the next step. If you did it in the beginning, you would wait until it's time.
Yeah,
the next step is take those same 5 things, 4 things, whatever they said was really important. Take the importance level of each one of those. So if they ranked a 10 or a 9 or whatever it is, have those on the sheet of paper. And then what I want you to do is say, we've talked about what's important to you. How are we doing? Let's look at the first one. So the first one is, and whatever that is, let's say it's making sure that we're on the same page and understanding your industry and the compliance rules that are out there. Let's say, how did we do? And let's say they say it was really important. It was a 10 out of 10. And so now you ask the question, okay, if we had to score us 1 star, 5 stars, what would you give us? And have them write it down with you. So you write it down, and if they give you a 5, you did really well. If you did 3, you did poorly. You did average, and then 1 is poor. And the hard part is number one, it's going to be hard for them to be extremely honest if they don't feel comfortable. So you're going to have to, in the beginning of this conversation, explain to them, all right, it's going to be fun and uncomfortable sometimes at the same time. Because we're really making sure that we're nailing all these things for you, but uncomfortable because maybe we didn't do a very good job. I'm not the kind of person, and I would tell people like this, I'm not the kind of person that sends you a survey and says, here, fill out this survey. Because
I was just about to ask that it seems like a lot of people would just say, all right, here's this PDF. Can you please fill this out and return it to me? But it really sounds like you're saying, no, you want to be sitting face to face with the client when you do this.
Absolutely. I would never email a survey or email this document to them to say, give me the score, because they're going to not understand it, or there's so much valuable information you can pull from this meeting.
Yeah, you have an opportunity to ask a lot of questions, ask for clarification, things like that.
Yeah, that's the key. And now that you have that information, you can ask extra questions that can give you what you need to do so you know whether or not you're going to continue on or not. I'm going to stop this conversation right now. If you're finding value in any one of our episodes, we want you to share it with somebody else. Just tell somebody, hey, go listen to these guys. This has been good. Second, give us a review. Tell us what you think. And the third thing, hit that subscribe button so that you always get updated every time we release an episode.
We'd really appreciate it. Now back to the show.
And so once you go through all of that and you get the ratings, now you can do some multiplication or you can do some calculations to say, all right, this is really important. So it's 10 and they scored us a 3 or a 5 or a 2 or whatever it is. And you multiply it out and you say, okay, this is how this looks for us. And then you have the other ones and you just keep doing that. And then you figure out what the average score is for yourself. So did you score 100 out of 100 or did you just score 50 out of 50? Whatever that number is, however you want to do that, that's really what you come out with. What you do next is there's 2 things you can do with this next. One is if you're at month 5, your score looks really good. Now's the time to say, wow,
hey,
and it just dawned on me. Yeah, it just dawned on me. We're kind of coming to the end of our agreement here. What do you want to do? Do you want to end it, or do we want to try to figure out what we need to do next? Because we see some things, but I want to make sure that you're on the same page with us. If they've graded you really well, they're open to that conversation. And they love giving you the feedback if you've done well. They're like, yeah, we love you. This is great. Now, if you've done poorly, you're probably going to get a no way. We don't want to work with you at all. But at least you know a month ahead of time than day before.
Well, I would think that if you've scored poorly, you wouldn't want to start that conversation of renewal right now. Maybe you say, okay, I've got 30 days to right the ship before I go back and ask for that renewal.
Yeah, that's the other option. You would wait a little bit, but the likelihood, if you've gotten this on paper and you've gotten this conversation going and you can't course correct fast enough, I don't know how you're going to recover. At that point, then we need to talk about, okay, how do we make sure that going forward, our image is protected, right? As the vendor. So how do we fix this going back? Let's look backwards. When we did this wrong, how can we correct that now? Is there anything we can do now to fix that? And sometimes they're going to, say different things. Sometimes they're going to say, well, we want our money back. Well, that's not going to happen, right? So, I mean, more than likely, some people do. So, but if that's your option, that's your option. But what are some of your options in getting that corrected? And you can go back and fix those things. So it opens the whole conversation to the point. Here's where I think this tool has become so powerful for me. I've had conversations where we found out that somebody else was bidding on a job that we were having and the contract was coming to the end. And we didn't know that they were going to do something else with somebody else or trying to find somebody else, what they were doing, to understand any of that. I did this worksheet with them. And I walked out of that room pretty much with we're going to work with you again. And the reason that happened is because they gave us really good scores. And what they did is they said, we've never had any of our vendors, and this is a national company, we've never had any vendor ever go through this with us, never let us talk through this scoring thing. Usually we get an email that says, how did we do? And there's a 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 little check marks, and that's it. And that's useless. We don't feel like we're giving them good feedback. We'll at least have a conversation with you. I said, okay, So what does that mean? She goes, well, we also learned part of our problem is we slowed you guys down. It's not you that was slowing us down. It was us. And they admitted that to me.
Yeah.
So how how that's like gold, right? So now so now if we're going to work together again, they know they need to speed it up, or they're going to admit it. And that's what happened. We worked with them again. They did something, they stalled it again. They went, oh, that's us. That's our problem. Sorry. We're working on it.
Yep.
We'll get back to you shortly. And that's what they did, because they recognized that was their fault and they knew that was going to be an issue later for them again. So they prevented that. The other way that this can be used, so Lane, if you were to say the size of this company that you had this 5 months in, you're about to hit the 6 month
Yep.
size of the company, is it really, really small, or are there like 20, 30, 40 people there?
Yeah, there's 20, 30. Yeah,
Okay.
probably about 30 people.
Okay. So when you've got that many people, what'll end up happening is, in this conversation, if you're doing really well, you can say to that person, listen, I know that keeping the expenses in line were really important. And I know that there's another area of the company that also could use some of our services. Is there any chance that they would want to, would you ever do an introduction to that division?
Yep. Yeah.
They've already rated you really well on something that you really have done well with. If it's a large company and has divisions and the group that you're working with is smaller, but they can push you out to, that's happened. I've used this tool, sat down with a company. They had 3, 4, 5 silos that they had in their company and several people in each silo. And we were working with one. And in the conversation, we scored really well on certain things. They said, boy, is there any other section or any other division of this company that could use these same qualities and skills? And they went, it's funny you say that. This other division, they mentioned the division, the HR section, they actually have a need for that same thing, and they would love this. And I would say, I don't suppose you'd like introduce me to them, would you? And they're like, well, let's just walk over there and talk to them. And that's what happened.
That's great. Yeah.
That's how this tool works. That's why this worksheet is so important, because it has so many uses all over the place. We had a client that was coming to the end of their contract. We weren't sure how this was going to do. And we knew that from a service level, it was good. We just didn't know how well performance metrics were doing on the other side, because we see some of it. Was that their expectations, or were there other expectations that we didn't know about? And so a full quarter before the end of our agreement, we sat down and did this. And in that quarter, they said, guys, it's 10s all across. They gave us top scores on all of them. And the reason they did, they said, our numbers and our metrics, we expected to hit X. And in 12 months, we hit that number in 10. And it was like, oh, and that was a good thing. So that's how this tool gets used. And he said, when we finished that meeting and that conversation, he basically said, we need to renew and we need to know now how we can add this other division in too. So that's how that conversation went. So just know that this tool, this worksheet that you can work through, can be very, very powerful, can be too powerful, because sometimes you end up getting a little bit more work than you're ready for. Trust me on that one. So what questions come up for you, Lane? Anything that you can think of that somebody might be wondering once we've had this conversation?
So Rob, is maybe not in this exact same format, but is there a way to cover this before the contract gets signed? You brought up the client that is expecting a response in 2 hours. That might be something that I would really want to know before that order gets signed, because if that's really their expectation, either I need to decide if I even want this contract, or maybe that's going to impact the pricing.
Yeah. So that's a really good question. And it's a very good question for somebody that's newer or a little bit of experience in sales. As you know, you don't want to bring up anything you don't have to in sales, right? So how do you do this? So what happens by doing this early, even my recommendation is to do this after you've signed the contract, but before you really get too far into the work. That's the best time, because you're setting expectations on both sides and you can share it with the team. You can do all that stuff. That said, if you find that you are running into that problem where it's coming up a few times where, boy, response is an issue, either on your final, before you finish it out, like you've been working with them for a while and response is an issue, or early on where people are asking for better responses before you even started, then I would bring it up in your questions during your sales calls. So you would do that by saying something along the lines of, and again, this is before your sale, before your contract signed, all that kind of stuff. You would say something like, sometimes some of our clients have asked us about our response time. And I don't know that I can't imagine that being an issue for you. Would you like to talk about that? There's two things that come up. One is they're like, well, what does that mean? This doesn't sound good, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So what's your answer going to be? Yeah, I want to talk about that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, then that's perfect timing, because if you've had this issue come up quite a few times because of either your competitors or you have had your own issues with it, having that come up, now is the time. So you say it seriously. They are like piqued interest, man. What's going on? Sounds like a problem. Now you can say, usually we, before I kind of get into that, what was your expectation? Like what do you
Yeah.
think good reasonable response time is?
No, that's good, because that at least lets them come out and say, this is what I think should be fair. And then you can still have that same conversation, but
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So if they said then it should be 60 minutes, and you're like, oh, 60 minutes. Wow. Okay. Like is in 1 hour, right? Yeah. 1 hour. Okay.
yeah.
Wow. What if I can't do that in 60 minutes? So then you start having those questions, because if you're just like you're meant, just like you, why you're asking the question is this is the time to have that out, right? This is the time to talk it out and
Yeah.
decide whether or not you want to work together or not. That is totally the right mentality and totally the right attitude and the way to approach it. But I would only do that if it's an issue and it has come up a few times. That's a problem. So if it's not been a problem and you're always hitting your deadlines, and also, or you're always hitting the response time, and you're also running into where your competitors aren't usually the issue, they're usually hitting their response times too, and that's not a problem for people, I wouldn't bring it up because it's not so
Right.
much an issue.
Okay. And is there a way to use this when you're, not necessarily with a client, but outside of your direct client relationship?
Well, that kind of reminds me of of another way to use this. Yes, there is another way. Um, Imagine you just started working with a client. You sit down, you go through all these items these are typical things that are people want to rate us on, good, bad, or otherwise. In that conversation, they say these are the top five that they want to evaluate you on later. Okay, let's say that the response time is one of those items. That's really important. That might be, and you can do a really good job with that. That's one of your points of really doing really well and executing. So either early on in your relationship, you could say to them, that's a common one that comes up, and we've had several times where that's been an issue where they bring up, and it's never been an issue for us as much as people think it would be. So I'm kind of curious. That's a really important issue. And it seems to be an important issue, particularly in my field. Seems to be something that's out there where people are struggling with. And I know this is kind of an odd question, but now that we have this as a ranking and what's going on and what's important to you, and we're going to share that with the team and make sure that everybody's working the same way that we're supposed to be doing from a timeline standpoint. I'm just curious. You've got your top 5 things listed here. Can you think of anybody else? I don't mean necessarily in this company, but outside of this company, your vendors or other friends that own businesses that are around the neighborhood or come in the city that you would want to introduce us to, because these are the same issues that they run into.
Mm.
And so it kind of becomes this open referral, slight referral, like you're asking for, but you're not really. Like it's
Yeah,
an
the
interesting,
indirect referral request.
yeah,
Yeah.
kind of like it's just like, hey, you might know somebody that has the same qualities that they're looking for in a vendor like us, or a company like us. I don't suppose you have anybody that you want to introduce us to. I mean, I'd be happy to talk to them too, just in case it ever comes up. Know that we're here for that, right? And at the end, when you've actually gotten good scores, listen, you ranked us really well with response. You really did a really good job where we had some deadlines that we had to hit, and we hit those. You ranked us really well with that. You also took us and said we were really good at basically being in line with what you needed in terms of executing correctly and fitting within your industry and all that kind of stuff, and really understanding your business. We pretty much covered all areas of your business. I don't know if you've scored us really well. Can you think of any other company that you guys have worked with, vendors or sister companies that don't compete with you guys, that somebody that you guys work with together in tandem, or any other company owners that would want to have somebody like us to help them the same way we helped you guys? It's just one more step to take to get a
Yeah. Yeah.
referral. And this is why I say this worksheet is so powerful, because there's so many different ways you can go, and it's all based on what the customer or the client answers, does, and needs.
Yep.
And it's the best position to be in. That's what I love about it. It's like you are just reacting to what they need, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It seems very powerful because they are telling you what is important to them.
Yep.
So yeah, so then you can take this and really grow the relationship in the business in a positive way.
Yep. Totally. All right. Well, I hope that helps. I would recommend pulling this up, going through this exercise with your client at month 5, and I would do the beginning of it and the end of it, have them rate you at the same time. Then you know where you stand. And more than likely, if they're really happy, they're going to say, what else did you guys see that you thought there was something else we could do? What else do you think that we should do? And they're going to ask you, and you're going to have to ask them some questions back. Well, there's some things, but is there anything comes to mind first for you? And then we can talk about what we see. Let them tell you first. Because if it's their idea, that's what they want, and it's the same as yours, that's perfect. Best position ever. So,
Yep.
All right. Cool. Well, I hope that helps everybody else too. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. It's a very powerful worksheet that we like to use, and I strongly recommend it because what it'll do is it'll give you some insights that you didn't even realize, and it'll help you grow your business, top line and bottom line, all the way around. And your team's going to operate even better if you have a team working behind you. So until next time,
see ya.
Thank you for listening to The Slow Pitch. Do you have a question about sales? Call or text your question at 608-708-SLOW. That's 608-708-7569. Or you can email them to questions@theslowpitch.com. Slow down and close more.
Thanks as always for listening today. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review. We really appreciate it. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Slow Pitch. We were mixed today, as always, by Johnny Polakis, and we were produced by High Gravity Studios. Music credits and other notes are in the show notes section on theslowpitch.com, and we'll be back with another episode soon.